Hi everyone and welcome to Afternoon Equality. Today I'm talking to Tawheeda Wahabzada about her experience as a undocumented immigrant and becoming a DACA recipient. I actually knew her in high school, so this is really exciting for me because I didn't know any of this when we were growing up. And it wasn't until she got published in the New York Times, she actually wrote an open letter for self-deporting after the Trump administration threatened to rescind DACA that I even knew any of this about her. So I'm really excited to talk to her about this and I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. So we know each other from high school. Like we grew up in the same city, we went to the same schools, we had the same teachers, and I don't know what context this would ever come up, but I didn't know about your immigration status, and I don't think you did either, like from what we had spoken about before. So it was a surprise when your letter in the New York Times came out because I remember you published it, and I was like, wait, like I know this person, and then I was reading, and like, and it was just like, like it was kind of like a whole new world of like, wait, but like how did no one know this thing? Like the more I think about it now, it's like the more like I have no reason to, but at the same time, it's like I felt like it was something big that
Yeah.
like you'd think it would have come up at some point. But so if you don't mind, like could you describe how you found out and what that all meant to you, especially in our little small town of Carson City, Nevada?
Carson City, yeah. So I found out at like 16 at the DMV. I didn't have all the necessary paperwork to get a driver's permit. Yeah, the driver's permit. And that made me realize, oh, wait a second. I grew up in the States. Why am I not eligible? And then that's when my mom started to explain about my immigration status. And I had like a sense of shame because, like, to put things into perspective, I grew up in Carson City since I was 5 years old.
Mhm.
Um, I like Carson City is very conservative. It
Right.
is diverse in the sense that there's a large Latino population and we do have Native American reservation, but you could see the inequalities from the city itself, where neighborhoods are predominantly Latino, neighborhoods that are predominantly white.
Yeah,
So you
no,
could
there,
see
yeah.
the segregation from that city planning.
Mhm.
And even though it's diverse, it's not as
It's not LA, it's not.
it's not LA, and we still have that small town mentality too,
Mhm.
like, I remember, like, a lot of our teachers were recruited from states like Montana, so if you have teachers coming from lesser diverse states, they probably have their own biases from their exposure from growing up in those states,
Mhm.
right? Like, if I grew up in a very small town with very few diversity or diverse population and then moved to another rural place,
Mhm.
I don't have a whole lot of exposure to different groups of people. So it's still like that conservative mindset is still there. And I think like with that plus like 9/11
Mhm.
being Afghan American, I had some like level of shame. Like there was part of me that wanted to be as American as possible, especially from 9/11. And then the undocumented status felt like another added burden. Like, oh my God, I need to hide that part of me. Because that's like another level of discrimination.
Right.
Being brown, coming from an Afghan background, plus being undocumented,
Sorry.
at least I can hide my undocumented side.
Right. Sorry, can I ask you one thing,
Sure.
like, let me know if you're comfortable with it. When 9/11 did happen,
Mhm.
how did that like what was that how was that for you? Because you were let's see, I was in
I was
6th.
in 6th grade.
I was in 7th grade. I'm like, I was at Carson Middle, like, when the announcement came. So you
Mhm.
were in 6th grade.
Mhm.
Like,
It
did
it sucked. Like, I remember kids calling me terrorist. I remember teachers being silent. Yeah.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
And did they know you were Afghan American, or did they just know that you looked different?
They knew I was Afghan American because like, my name is so foreign.
Okay, okay. Oh, I'm
Mhm.
sorry.
Yeah.
That's I didn't even think about that before because, like, I mean, you said you found out about your undocumented status when you're 16. I'm like, no, but 9/11 happened way before that.
Mhm. So it's like I had so many other identities. So plus with that, like there's that level of shame. Like growing up in Carson City, a city that's like predominantly white, having that shame of like being of like Middle Eastern background.
Mhm.
On top of that, finding out that you're undocumented, I
Yeah.
wanted to hide the undocumented side as much as possible. I wanted to appear as
Normal.
American as possible.
Yeah.
That was something I was able to hide.
Okay. But I mean, you couldn't drive.
No, not until I was, like, 23, until I had my DACA status, and imagine not being able to drive in Carson City, right? Like,
Yeah.
having a driver's license felt like a rite of passage. It
Well,
did, like, people would have, like, those long keychains hanging from their pocket, everyone had a
yeah,
car.
like the lanyards, and then you put your, when the tassels from our graduation caps, you put them on the mirrors.
Mhm.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I missed out on all of that.
Oh.
I
So
was that person that needed to rely on rides, and I would, like, make up excuses like, "Oh, my parents were strict, that's why I can't get a license or anything." Like, I would always come up with excuses
which is, like, kind of that's sad that you had to do that.
because, like, no one will, really understand. We're all teenagers. Like,
Right.
as a teenager, you're, like, more self-centered, focused on your own issues that's going on, you know what I mean? Like, the gravity and the depth of what's going on, like, what the life of an undocumented immigrant
Mhm.
is very difficult to convey to teenagers. I mean, I didn't even know the whole extent. That was just like the beginning of me
Right.
going through certain loopholes in life.
But so when you found out, that was before DACA was even passed.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
what
DACA was never passed. It was just introduced because it's
oh,
an executive power. When you have an executive order, you don't pass anything, you just implement it.
okay. So the DREAM Act was like that was the actual legislation that still hasn't been passed, right?
It hasn't been passed.
It keeps getting brought up, I feel like. So I feel like a lot of people, like, it's so normalized in the conversation, they just assume
Mhm.
that it's something it exists because it's like, but no, like, it exists, but it's not really in effect.
Exactly.
So what exactly were you limited to besides just driving? What did being undocumented mean for you? Like, what couldn't you do? What could you do?
Yeah, so I couldn't travel internationally. I couldn't work, couldn't drive, couldn't get loans or grants. So like yeah, so there are like states in the US that are in like they intentionally make it very difficult for dreamers to enroll in colleges. So there are some states in the South that would make dreamers pay out of state tuition because technically you're undocumented, and because of that, you're not an actual resident of that state. So they would
But
treat dreamers like international students. So like there are a lot of issues. So luckily with UNR and Nevada,
mhm,
they treat undocumented students with in-state tuition as long as you graduate from high
mhm,
school in Nevada,
okay.
but you don't qualify for federal loans, grants, or assistance. So you got to figure out how to pay your own tuition and how to get private scholarships.
And that has nothing to do with DACA. That's just like
That's just because, like,
that's
to
just because one.
qualify for federal assistance, you have to have a green card.
So DACA was never passed, but when the executive order for DACA came down, were you excited? Like, what did it mean for you and your
Yeah, so I think, like, so DACA was introduced in summer of 2012, June 2012. So it's been like a month after I graduated from UNR. So I had a college degree. I can't work legally. I
okay?
had no idea what I could do in the US. Like, okay, I mean, I can pick up unpaid internships, but I also need to make a living. So I
Mhm.
remember like graduation was a bit bittersweet in the sense that I was super excited to graduate, but also I can't get into the workforce.
Right, so what do you like
I was like freaking out. Like, I was just sad and like really like considering making the decision to leave. And then the next month, Obama introduced DACA, and it was just like, oh my God, this
Mhm.
is a sign. I need to take this sign and
And go
like
with it.
stay here. I was really happy. Like I remember when I was first introduced, I was really happy because I could finally work. I could get a driver's license. Like these little things that we take for granted
Mhm.
that was not given to me. Like, oh my God, it felt amazing. But like the more I got into like the realization of DACA, it is like a short-term solution. I could only like I can't freely travel internationally.
Even
It
with DACA.
I can only travel for school, work, or emergency purposes.
Okay.
So I had to file paperwork like 90 days in advance to get approved. And for me to re-enter the United States, I need to have that paper document with me to show that I'm able to re-enter. So like
Okay.
there are these things that make like it's a temporary solution. So even though I could drive, I could work, I'm really thankful for that. But there
Mhm.
was still no pathway for me to become a green card holder. And Obama made that clear. Like he introduced DACA for the purpose of like to help dreamers
Mhm.
out while until a permanent solution happens.
Which he was never able to do because Congress.
Exactly, exactly. Like Republicans didn't push anything. They framed DACA as they basically framed DACA as an amnesty, even though it wasn't even an amnesty at all.
Right, 'cause you it
So
wasn't
because
really
of
giving you anything to work with, it was just giving you like, "Okay, now you can get a driver's license and a job."
exactly.
But it
And you
was
have to renew it every 2 years. So again, like you know how in like job interviews, interviewers would always ask people like where they see themselves in 10 years. I
right,
couldn't see myself in 10 years. Like it's just like every 2-year increment. Oh,
right,
what's next? Am
right,
I
because you don't
yeah,
have a guarantee that in like I mean, in 2 years, you don't have that guarantee that you'll still be able to be able to plan anything,
exactly.
let alone 10 years.
Exactly. So it was difficult, um, and I just kept getting more and more discouraged over time. Like I was somewhat hopeful with Hillary Clinton,
Mhm.
like, oh, with the Clinton administration, I don't think there would be a DREAM Act happening anytime soon just because of the overall criticism towards Hillary
Mhm.
Clinton, especially from the right.
Right,
But at least people were still protected. So I didn't have hope, but it was more, well, with the Clinton administration, the dreamers are safe, but with the Trump administration, dreamers aren't safe. But it was just tiring, like, when, during the 2016 elections, I was 2016, and when Trump lost, I was just or when Trump won, I was just devastated. I was scared about my future, like, I was really, really tired of, first of all, waiting on my future in 2-year increments, and secondly,
right.
losing a potential work permit.
Right, because
And
I mean, I think one of the platforms that he was running on was rescinding DACA, like, that was one of the promises
exactly,
he made was that he was gonna rescind it.
exactly, and every day during that administration was like, "Am I spared another day?" Like, that's what it felt like.
Right,
And that's even worse than planning your life in 2-year increments.
right.
And I just kept getting tired and tired of that. Like, this isn't a healthy way to spend your 20s like that. I
No,
don't have any
you're essentially
agency.
living in fear.
Yeah. Like, I didn't have any agency at all.
Right, you can't really make any choices for your own
Mhm.
life at that point, you're just like, you're making choices with the knowledge and the fear that
Mhm.
it made you like, I mean, just like that possibility that you're not gonna be it's not gonna go anywhere. Like, and
Exactly.
that tomorrow you could be, like, forced to leave, and I mean, like, and
Exactly.
then what do you do? Like, just pack up
And
and start a new life, like, sure.
yeah. And I was also just, like, tired of hiding that part of me, you know? Like, I still had that shame because I had a lot of imposter syndrome, like, "Oh my goodness, I made it this far with DACA," but I wanna hide that part because I don't wanna be seen any different. I
Right.
wanna be seen as normal as possible. So it's like I was so tired of kind of like not giving half lies to people about my status.
Well,
Again, that element of shame, like, kind of came back, you know?
yeah. Well, and I mean, like, to that point, I feel like a lot of people assume that dreamers and, like, and DACA recipients are like, I feel I hear a lot of people, compare them to, like, to freeloaders or to, like, they're kind of they're just here to take advantage of the system, is I feel like an argument that I've heard brought up. And that but that's not the case at all, like, you
Most undocumented immigrants aren't even freeloaders. They just want a better life for their family and will do whatever it takes. Like, when it comes to immigrating to the US, like, some countries have wait times of, like,
yeah.
over a decade. And a decade is a long time, especially if you have a young child or if you're expecting, like, 10
Or
years.
if you're in danger.
Exactly. And when it comes to that, like, people's priority of, like, one's health is more important than the wait time of 10 years. Like, at the
Yeah,
end of the day, many immigrants just want a better life.
right.
America is the land of opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I have a good friend right now, like, she's from South Africa, and she had to like she just wanted to come over here and marry her husband. Like, her husband is an American citizen. They met working on a TV show in South Africa. But it's like there was like there was the possibility that if any of the like especially during the Trump administration, like there was always a possibility that if anything went wrong with her paperwork or like or how they they had to like actually really strictly order the way they got engaged and got married, because other there was a possibility that she wouldn't be able to see him for like up to a year, just because of the residency and the green card paperwork. Like it's a whole of like if you get engaged overseas, it's a whole other kind of like visa than if you get engaged in the US.
Intere
There's
It's like
something
all these little, like, caveats. There's always, like, some weird rule to another rule. Like,
right, but
immigration
it's
law
like
doesn't make any sense.
she wanted to live with her husband. Like that shouldn't be and it's like and they're both hard workers, like neither of them have criminal records. Like there's no reason they can't be together except for the current immigration policy.
Exactly.
That was the only thing that was possibly keeping them apart.
Jeez.
And it's frustrating,
It
and I
is.
mean and she's like she's a white woman of privilege and she knows it, and it's still like that was still like a fear that she had. So I can't imagine for like for someone like you, or for like for children especially who don't have those resources, who don't have like who like just or like just the idea that like they're stuck, they're here already, like what are they going to do?
Exactly, and also, like, it also kind of not necessarily it messes with you, but it kind of makes you wonder what it means, like, what is, like, doing good versus doing bad? Like, if you do good, you get, like, rewarded, right? Like, that's what we're conditioned to at a young age. So it's like if we've been, like for example, in my case, I've never had a speeding ticket or anything like that, but
Mhm.
why am I being punished by US laws for something that I didn't do?
Right, I
That's
mean
something that's, like, all beyond my control. Wait a second. It doesn't make sense to get punished that way. Like, when it comes to, like, the logic that we're thinking about, like, rewards versus punishment, it
Mhm.
just doesn't make any sense.
Right. But so when DACA was I don't know what's the verb here.
Like, rescinded?
No, when DACA came into effect,
Mhm.
what were the pros and the cons? Like the pros, you were able to drive and you were able to get a job.
You you have some level of freedom, right? Like, you're protected from deportation. You're
Okay,
able to you're able to live life. Like, having a job, being able to drive is a huge game changer. You
right.
could provide income to your family. You can get from one place to another.
Mhm.
So, and you're also spared from deportation.
Right.
So, those
The
are all like, you can come out of the shadows basically and
okay.
actually contribute for yourself and to the economy
Right,
without doing that, like, under the table.
right. But
So
so
it's a huge plus. But the thing is, you're not a legal resident. So there's, like, a huge difference between a lawful resident versus a legal resident. So DACA recipients are lawful residents, but they're not legal residents. So legal residents apply to like um, visa holders with like works employment statuses or green card holders. So
Okay.
there's like I'm not an immigration lawyer, but that's like the general gist of like what it means to be lawfully present versus legally present.
Okay. All right.
And
I've never heard that before. That's really interesting.
yeah, and you still don't have like the whole freedoms. Like even with DACA, students can't get like grants or loans from the federal government. Like they don't qualify for FAFSA.
Okay. That sucked.
Hmm.
I mean, luckily, like at least like I think pretty much every student in Nevada gets a Millennium Scholarship if they go to
Hmm.
UNR or UNLV, right? So
Pretty
there,
much.
but
That's the good
otherwise you had to
part.
take the rest of it on your own.
Yeah, but that's not like a federal thing, that's like a state government,
Right.
so
Yeah.
state governments
Exactly.
are different.
Right.
And Nevada has always like, as much as people make fun of Nevada, Nevada has always been like ahead of its game when it comes to these aspects, you know?
Right.
They've always been more welcoming, even though like parts of the state is like very conservative and we've had like a history of Republican governors in the
Yeah.
past. They've
Yes.
been more understanding and sympathetic towards these issues.
Okay. Well, that's like, that's great. I love that. But
Mhm.
so going back to you were talking about how having DACA meant that you weren't necessarily living in fear of deportation, but like with that said, you still ultimately decided to leave.
Yeah,
Uh,
because yeah.
yeah. So like what like I mean you did decide to leave. You in the letter you wrote in the New York Times, you call it self deportation. And so what like tell me how you got to that decision and how it affected you and your loved ones since then.
Sure. So the other part of the question is a bit more emotional, and I'm still like digesting all of that information. So
Okay.
I can't really, it's still hard for me to express the emotional side of that. But
Right.
for the decision to leave, it basically like Trump's reversal on DACA just brought my decision to leave. Like I was so sick and tired of
Hmm.
just waiting for a solution. Like there was no way for me to get like a H-1B, which is like a work visa through my employers. There was no way for me to get a green card except through marriage. But I don't want to put all of that emotion, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket or keep on hoping that, oh, I'll find someone who would like
Right.
help me get a green card, you know? Like there's just so many, that's a lot of expectations, you know? It
Right.
hurts yourself, like, I was so insecure of my own status that I was afraid of committing in a long-term relationship because I was afraid that what if me disclosing my status to someone would
Drive them away.
yeah, exactly, like, I don't wanna be seen any different, I wanna be seen as myself, or, also, like, the fact that I was turning 30, like, I never had a carefree life, I've never really enjoyed my 20s. I've just been constantly, like, hustling, waiting for a solution, and I was so tired of waiting for a solution.
So you left
Yeah.
and you went to Canada because you actually have.
Canada, Toronto as a starting point, and we'll see where life takes me.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
it could be
you chose
anywhere, like,
Canada.
hmm?
Sorry, say that
I
again?
said I said it could be anywhere depending on, like, whatever job I have next, so who
Okay.
knows?
Yeah. But so you chose Canada because you were a born citizen of Canada, right?
Yep, so I was born there and therefore, like, I have citizenship there, so and then I chose Toronto because I don't know of any other city, and also, like, I have family here.
Mhm.
But honestly, like, I'm figuring out what home is, right? Like, I
Yeah.
consider Carson City to be home. I consider, like, Washington, DC to be home because I live there.
Mhm.
But to me, Toronto doesn't feel like home, and I'm figuring out where home should be. And I think it's also the pandemic. Like,
Yeah.
it isn't like Toronto isn't a place where I see myself. I
Okay.
see it as like a launching pad
Okay.
of wherever like life will take me next. Like I chose here out of like comfort in the sense that, okay, I have family here,
Okay.
but I'm ready for the next city.
Yeah, the
Eager,
next step.
eagerly. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Um, so what are 3 things you would like people to know about DACA recipients now? Like, because I know you're not the only one in this boat and with me.
Sure. I'm tired about how DACA recipients are framed as kids. Oh, they're kids. It's like, no, we're no longer kids.
No,
We're
you're
grown adults.
yeah.
We like maybe in 2006 we were kids, but now we're grown adults, about to have family, about to grow in our career. But
Yeah.
that being said, like I think it makes sense as to why politicians try to frame us as kids because like kids are innocent, but just because 'cause we're grown adults, that doesn't mean, like just because we're grown adults, that doesn't mean that it's our fault that we're in this status, like,
Right, like,
we've
you
been
didn't
here at
have
a
to
young
in the moment.
age, but it's been so many years have passed by to where we're adults. We're approaching our mid-20s, late 20s, mid-30s, like,
Mhm.
we're trying to make a living, and this temporary solution is not enough.
Well, it's a temporary solution that's been around for it got
2012.
2012,
Yeah.
so almost a decade. That's not temporary, and it was never
Mm-mm.
meant to be, like, a permanent solution, but you can't
Exactly. So it's like we need to frame that as, okay, these people, like DACA has been in existence since 2012. They've been here years before 2012. I
right,
was in the US for 25 years.
right,
Like, there was no pathway.
right, and I mean, there still isn't, which is unfortunate.
Like, very few, but still, like, those options, like, are so minimal, you know? It's like
Well, and I think, like, the options that exist now, like, from what I've heard other people say, like, who not just, like, DACA, but who have had, like, issues with, like, visas and things like that, they have to leave first before they can come back. And
exactly.
there are people that don't have a place to go.
Exactly, exactly. Like for me, it's I'm happy that like yes, I am technically barred from the US for 10 years. There are ways it sucks. It sucks. Like I have friends that could get married in the next 10 years.
Right.
But what I'm thankful for is like again, immigration laws are so complex. Like there are always exceptions to the rule. Like in a couple years I can come back on a tourist visa.
Mhm.
Or if I land a dream job at, like, the UN or something like that, like, there are ways like that, but again, those options are so limited if
Right,
you
they're
think
not realistic
about
for everyone.
exactly, and in many ways, I see myself really lucky and very thankful for those options, but it still doesn't make sense, like, why am I still barred for 10 years for something I didn't do?
10 years is such a long time. Like, that's a generation.
Mhm, yeah. I mean, anything can happen from now until then. Like, I'm pushing for the removal of the 10-year bar because it is a form of separation.
Mhm. Right, I
Um,
mean, you still have family here.
exactly. Oh, yeah, a lot of family. A lot of people, like, I'm not the only dreamer that left the United States during the Trump administration. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of dreamers have left out of frustration. A lot of immigrants have left out of frustration and are, like, barred. Like, these are issues that Biden needs to address. Like, there are people that just quit for the sake of their own mental health and gave up because the Trump administration has made so many lives difficult. So how
Right.
are we gonna address that?
Yeah, for sure. So would that be your number 2 thing that you want people to know about DACA recipients, or is that something else?
Okay, so number 2 thing about DACA recipients. Oh, totally forgot. We just, like, went into, like,
I know.
different
No, it's
tangents.
great, I love
Um, Number 2 thing about DACA recipients, they're just like it's an it's difficult, like, it's always, like, a constant battle with immigration, like we're always like showcased with like exceptional dreamer stories where dreamers
Mm,
are tokenized and it makes sense like to tug on people's heartstrings, but we're just normal people that just want a normal life. We shouldn't
yeah,
be framed as a as a mechanical engineer or a PhD student or a physician because not all DACA recipients
Right.
had that opportunity to pursue education. At the end of the day, regardless of someone's educational degree, someone's career, we all just want a better life. And I think that comes back to the heart of America. Like, people just want a better situation.
Mm-hmm.
People just are doing anything they can to have a better life.
Oh,
That's it.
right. Pursue the American dream.
Exactly, exactly. The American dream can be anything from pursuing whatever like career ambitions you want. But I think that's like another thing that I want people to know that we're not we shouldn't be exceptional. We shouldn't be tokenized.
Yeah, we
There's
don't
so
have to
many dreamer
be.
stories. And I think that hides I think like constantly like tokenizing dreamers and their accomplishment undermines other dreamers who didn't have those resources to pursue education or like these amazing career opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
but they are just as hardworking.
Right.
They
Yeah. No,
deserve
and they still.
that much of a status in the United States
Right.
as just as everyone else.
Right. They still contribute to society. They still pay taxes. They still like, like they contribute to society. They have kids. They're people.
Exactly.
They're human.
Exactly, exactly. And that's the difficult part, like framing, like having to be exceptional to be accepted.
Yeah. It kind of I know it's a conversation that comes up with like women's rights, with like it's like being a minority, even like just that idea that you have to work that much harder just to feel like you can have a seat at the table,
Mhm.
when it's like it's wholly unnecessary if we take away that like if you take away the idea that you have like it's like there's this bar that not everyone meets, and yet, or like, but like there's a bar that not everyone meets, and yet there's people that are up there that don't deserve it. But then if you want, like, if you don't come from that one group, you have to really like you have to jump your way up there,
Mhm.
and it's like it's not fair, and it's not right.
Exactly.
Like, why can't people just be people?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's hopefully we're able to change that dynamic too.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're able to like bring that discussion to the table. And I think things are slowly shifting.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Like, especially now, like one of the biggest thing, especially with me launching this, like what I want to do is I'm taking on that idea that yes, like now the election's over, like yes, it was a victory. We all came up, we showed up, we raised our voices and all that, but there's still conversations that have to happen. Like
Oh
this
yeah,
isn't it. Like this isn't the end of it. This is just like the beginning.
exactly. And like even though like we won, we didn't exactly won the moral vote.
Right.
Like the country is still divided.
So divided.
And we would imagine like one would expect that Biden would win by a landslide, but he
Mhm.
didn't.
No.
And it makes me wonder if the pandemic didn't happen, would Trump win? And
Right.
probably. And
Right.
that's the scary part. Like everyone anticipated that Biden would win by a landslide.
Hmm.
And I think it's like we lost the moral vote and I don't know why.
Hmm.
So it just shows the division of this country and there's a ton of healing left to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know if 4 years is enough.
I agree with that. So is there a third thing that you want people to know about DACA recipients?
Again, like we're normal people. We all have different stories. I'm just one out of 6 or 700,000 recipients, like, and there's also generational difference between DACA recipients too. There are some recipients that are in their mid to late 30s, and
Right.
there are some who are 16 years old.
Right.
Like,
Right. Because DACA has been around for
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So, like, there are so many age groups and so many demographics of DACA recipients, to say
Mhm.
at least.
Right. Okay. So is there a way that people can help with this situation now, or like how would you propose like we start creating that change and
Like,
fixing this, like, Because like DACA, as much as it was offered as a solution, I think it's become a problem in and of
Well,
itself.
there needs to be a permanent solution. There needs to be a DREAM Act. There needs to be comprehensive immigration reform. Like, I, because typically, like for the DREAM Act, you have to be physically present in the United States to qualify. So if the DREAM Act passes, unfortunately, I don't qualify, but made that decision knowingly that I'm not going to qualify because I'm tired of waiting for a solution, right?
Right.
So there needs to be a DREAM Act. Secondly, there needs to be a removal of the 3 and 10-year bars that prevent people from visiting family, visiting friends.
Right.
Um, in terms of legislation, remember, like there needs to be, we need to pass the legislation in the House and in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
So the Democrats have the majority in the House. They may or may not have the majority in the Senate after the runoff election. But
Mm-hmm.
even then, to pass legislation in the Senate, you need 60 votes to
Right.
break filibuster. And depending on how divided the country is and how divided the senators are, like Biden may not be able to get the necessary 60 votes in the Senate.
Right. It's all going to be gridlocked again.
Exactly. Like there could still be obstructionism in the Senate because there might be like greater efforts to push like Republicans to vote no against any legislation. Like
Mm-hmm.
there may not be bipartisanship. It all really depends on the strategy of the GOP and how they cooperate with the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Because in 2010, when the DREAM Act was introduced, it passed House, but
Mm-hmm.
it had 55 votes in the Senate, 5 votes away from the
Right.
60 votes to break filibuster. 55 is still the majority. It's 55%, but
Right. But
still,
it's not, yeah. Like,
exactly. And that was when Obama had the majority in all
right.
uh,
In both, yeah.
branches.
Both chambers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like even with the Democrats having the majority is still not enough because you still need the 60 votes.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, like in 2013, when Mitt Romney lost the elections, the RNC had like a handbook on how they can, how the Republican Party can be better, like how the Republican Party can have a makeover.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic like a conclusion was to be fiscally conservative but socially moderate. And they never implemented that ideology. It went further and further right.
Right.
So, and it kept going right
Mm-hmm.
and right. So that was in 2013. So the Republican Party won't have an overnight makeover because the
No.
Republican Party elected many far right politicians. Like we don't have moderate, fiscally conservative politicians like
Well, and now
John
they're back
McCain.
in Supreme Court again.
Exactly. So I don't know how bipartisanship will be likely. Like the House, for example, elected QAnon conspiracy theorists.
Right.
So I don't know how like the Republican Party will shape in the future.
So does that just make you frustrated and
Oh yeah, exactly. Like we're constantly being toyed and our lives are just basically we're pawns in this game. And anything like immigration related is always placed in the back burner, always. Like after some national event, back burner once again.
yeah.
So while I am trying to be cautiously optimistic,
Mm-hmm.
I think like remember all that optimism that we had when Obama won in 2008.
Right.
Like while the ACA did pass, like we need to be it's okay to have the feeling of hope is fine because it's a huge breath of fresh air,
Mm-hmm.
but we should also be cautious too because I feel like our high expectations
Mm-hmm.
end up hurting us the most.
Right. But with that said, like it shouldn't be too much to ask to have some consideration after 8 years.
I know.
Like it's I feel like you're like, and it's not like you're asking to like open up all the borders and just let people start flooding in and like that's not the point here. Like the point is like this is a thing that happened. Like you were here, you were undocumented, but you still grew up American. And
Mhm,
now because of essentially like arbitrary paperwork, like you can't come back.
mhm.
Like and you're not like you're not allowed. And it's like it's literally just like it's arbitrary legislation that tells you you can't. It's like there's nothing like I mean,
It
where do the morals come in? It's like you're not again, you essentially grew up an American citizen.
I know. It doesn't make any sense. Like, when I explain that to people, they would say, "That doesn't make any sense." I'm like, "It doesn't make any sense to me either, but the law is the law at the moment."
Right.
I
So
Yeah.
is there like what would you suggest people do? Like just talk about it or like start
Um,
pushing for
there
legislation?
there are a lot of organizations that have always been pushing for immigration reform, like United We Dream, Forward.us, which is Mark Zuckerberg's organization. I
Okay.
think like as a starting point is like get involved with these groups,
Mhm.
volunteer. If anything, like grassroots is important.
Okay. All right, that's really great. And I can definitely link up to some of those organizations when this gets published. So that'll be
Awesome.
all right. So with that, thank you so much
Of
for
course.
logging on and having this chat with me. I know we got into some really like deep territory there. So thank you for being
Yeah.
open and accepting and just informative and yeah, great. Like lovely. I love this. Thank you so much.
I'm glad that you have this going on.
Yeah. Well, we're, trying. Just
Mhm.
I mean, like again, like, if we have to get the conversations out there is the point. And so
Exactly.
yeah.
I'm with you on that, and thank you for interviewing me.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you so much to Tawheeda again for coming and talking to me today. I'm so grateful that she felt safe enough to have this conversation with me and that she just had so much information to share. I'm going to link the organizations that she named in the show notes and also on the website. So please check those out if you want to know more. And I can't wait to sip with you again next week. See you again.